I nodded, though both of us knew that war cared little for promises. Every day brought new reports of enemy movements. Scouts returned with news of the Demon King's advancing forces, dark mages commanding monsters twisted by curses, their eyes glowing with unnatural light. The army grew restless, whispers of terror spreading through the ranks like poison. The priests led prayers at dawn and dusk, pleading with the gods for mercy and protection, while blacksmiths worked through the night to reinforce armor and weapons. The castle itself was a fortress of whispered prayers and frantic hope. Families said their goodbyes in private, soldiers penned final letters to loved ones, and young recruits tried to hide the fear that made their hands shake. Even the nobles, so often removed from hardship, wore grim expressions. In the midst of it all, I stood as a healer turned warrior, bracing for the battle of my life. Rena's declaration still echoed in my mind. "You are the sword." Yet, even as that burden weighed heavily, I knew that I was not alone. Leo's love and the kingdom's hope were the lights that guided me through the encroaching darkness. The final battle was approaching, and though fear gripped our hearts, a flicker of hope still burned. We would fight, and we would fight together. The Demon King's shadow loomed over us, but we were ready to meet it head-on. The morning of our final preparations was heavy with a cold mist, hanging like an omen over the gathered armies. Soldiers lined the great fields outside the castle, and banners from every corner of the United Kingdoms fluttered in the wind. There was a collective silence among the troops, a shared breath held before plunging into the unknown. It felt like the entire world was waiting. Leo stood at the forefront, his presence both commanding and deeply human. His blue cloak, embroidered with the crest of his kingdom, swept behind him as he paced, stopping every few moments to exchange quiet words with his commanders. Despite the steadfast exterior he projected, I could see the tension in the way his jaw clenched and his eyes searched the horizon. I stood beside Rena and the other mages, my hands trembling. Rena noticed and placed a calming hand on my shoulder. "Your magic is a beacon," she reminded me, her voice steady. "Today, the darkness will see just how brightly you can shine." The mages were scattered across the lines, each one ready to reinforce the soldiers with their spells. We had spent countless hours preparing for this moment, strengthening barriers, forging magical weapons, and rehearsing the strategy over and over until it was seared into our minds. But nothing felt certain. The enemy we faced was beyond mortal, beyond any battle we had ever fought. A horn sounded, a long, mournful note that reverberated through the air and made my heart pound. Scouts had returned, reporting that the Demon King's army was near. Shadows began to pool at the edges of the forest, and a suffocating wave of dark energy rolled over us. The first line of monsters emerged from the treeline, twisted and grotesque, with eyes that burned like embers. Behind them came the dark mages, their hands wreathed in black fire, and I could feel the malevolent power they carried. Leo turned to the soldiers and raised his voice, clear and strong. "Today, we fight not just for our kingdoms, but for our future. Hold the line, remember your training, and fight for those who cannot defend themselves." His gaze met mine briefly, and I saw the fear he tried so hard to mask, but also the trust he placed in me. The soldiers roared, their voices a defiant challenge to the encroaching darkness. Weapons were drawn, shields were raised, and the mages began to chant, weaving spells into the air. My heart felt like it would burst out of my chest, but I forced myself to steady. This was it, the beginning of the end. Rena grabbed my wrist, her voice urgent. "Lisa, remember what the goddesses told you. This is your time." I nodded, my fingers brushing the blade of divinity at my side. The light within me responded, growing brighter, pushing away the fear that threatened to consume me. With a deep breath, I began to channel the light of purity, feeling it surge through me, filling every corner of my being with warmth. The first clash came swiftly. Monsters charged, meeting the front lines with a ferocity that shook the ground. Steel clashed against claws, and spells burst through the air like fireworks, lighting up the early dawn. The scent of blood and burning magic filled the air, and I knew there was no turning back. I raised my hands and summoned a barrier of light, shielding a group of archers as a wave of shadow magic rushed toward them. My shield held, but I felt the impact like a punch to the gut, leaving me gasping for breath. "Lisa, stop." Leo's voice was desperate, breaking through the fog of exhaustion. He was by my side in an instant, his hand gripping my arm to steady me. His eyes were wide with worry, his usual calm replaced by raw fear. "You're pushing yourself too hard. You'll burn out." But I couldn't stop. Not when there was so much at stake. The kingdom. The people. Leo. My body screamed for rest, but my heart refused to relent. With a shaky breath, I raised my hand again, summoning another wave of light. But before I could release it, something moved. An immense shadow surged forward, faster than any of the creatures I had seen. I barely had time to react as it swiped at me with claws that could slice through steel. Leo leaped in front of me without hesitation, his sword meeting the creature's massive claws in a loud, metallic clash. Sparks flew, and I could feel the shockwave of the impact rattle through my bones. Leo's eyes locked onto mine, fear and determination blending in his gaze. "Stay back, Lisa," he urged, his voice rough with the strain of battle. "Let me protect you." But I couldn't just stand there. Not when the battle was so close to the edge. I pushed past him, summoning another blast of light, this time more concentrated, more controlled. The beam shot from my hands like a spear of pure energy, piercing the shadowy creature and sending it screeching into oblivion. But the relief was short-lived. More were coming. The air shimmered as Rena appeared beside us, her own magic swirling around her like a tempest. She raised her hands, and blue flames erupted, engulfing a group of dark mages trying to breach our defenses. The flames crackled and popped, bright and electric, casting everything in an eerie, cobalt light. "Lisa," Rena called, her voice cutting through the din of battle. "Focus. You need to channel your magic more efficiently, or we'll all be overwhelmed." I nodded, swallowing my fear as I focused, trying to center myself despite the chaos around me. But even as I gathered my energy, the ground beneath us trembled again, and a massive roar split the air. It was the Demon King. The sky overhead darkened, swirling with ominous clouds as the very air around us seemed to warp. My heart pounded as I looked toward the horizon, where the figure of the Demon King emerged. He was tall, towering over the monsters at his side, his armor dark and jagged like the night itself. His eyes burned with an infernal crimson glow, and a chill spread through the air, freezing everything in its wake. "We're not done yet," Leo said, his voice low, but determined. He turned to me, his hand gripping mine tightly. "Whatever happens, we do this together." And with those words, I knew. We were fighting for everything. For the future of the kingdom, for our lives, and for each other. I took a deep breath, the power within me stirring once again, but this time, it was different. The blade of divinity flared brighter than ever before, its light a beacon in the ever-encroaching darkness. I could feel the energy surge through me, merging with the light, creating a force so powerful it threatened to consume me. But I didn't back down. I wouldn't. Together, I whispered, meeting Leo's gaze once more. His grip tightened, and I felt the promise of his words echo in my heart. We would face this darkness together. And we would win. The ground trembled beneath us as the Demon King's monstrous figure emerged from the darkness. His immense form towered over the battlefield, casting a shadow that seemed to swallow the very light itself. The air grew thick, oppressive with his presence. His deep, mocking laugh echoed across the plains, shaking the very foundations of the world. The creatures he had summoned, hideous, nightmarish beasts, howled in his wake, their hunger for destruction palpable. He stood there, his armor black as midnight, adorned with jagged spikes, each one radiating with the dark magic that poured from his every movement. His crimson eyes locked onto me, and I felt an icy chill creep down my spine. He was no longer the distant threat I had imagined. He was here, in front of me, the source of all our suffering. "Ah, the little healer," the Demon King sneered, his voice like the growl of thunder. "So, you're the one they call the divine weapon, the one who carries the light of purity and the blade of divinity. He stepped forward, his every word laced with disdain, the dark magic swirling around him like a storm. How amusing! I had no idea the mortals had grown so desperate that they would entrust such power to a mere child. His voice was venomous, dripping with scorn. His laughter was a cruel, sharp sound that echoed in the emptiness, and it seemed to mock everything we had fought for. "You are nothing but a tool," he continued, his gaze never leaving me. "A pathetic vessel meant to carry my power, to serve as a stepping stone on my path to domination. You are divine, yes, but so was every other foolish mortal I've crushed beneath my heel. You think your light can stop me? That pitiful radiance, so fragile, so fleeting, it will burn out before the darkness. Your kind is always so easily consumed by it." He took another step, his voice growing colder, more confident with each passing word. "You cannot escape your fate, little divine being. I will claim you, as I have claimed so many others before you. The light within you is mine now, and once I have absorbed it, I will be unstoppable. I will rule this world, and you will be nothing more than a fading memory, a forgotten relic of a time that never should have been." I felt my heart race in my chest, his words striking me like cold daggers. He saw me as nothing more than a prize, an object to be taken and consumed. But I wouldn't, let him have that power. Leo stood beside me, his sword gripped tightly in his hand. His eyes were fierce, but I could see the fear in them, the fear of losing me to the very darkness that we had all feared. He didn't speak, but I felt his determination, his unspoken promise to protect me no matter the cost. The Demon King's eyes flickered briefly to Leo, his lips curling into a twisted smile. Ah, the little hero, still thinking he can protect her. How quaint. You're both fools. She is mine to claim, and no mortal can stop me. With a final, mocking gesture, the Demon King raised his hand. Dark tendrils of magic erupted from the ground, twisting toward me like snakes. I summoned the blade of divinity, the light of it shining brighter than ever before. I slashed the air, sending waves of light that clashed against the shadows, but the Demon King's magic pressed harder, his tendrils coiling tighter around me. "Your light is weak," he snarled. "You are nothing compared to the power I possess." The clash of dark and light was a force of nature. The air crackled with energy, and the battlefield trembled with every strike. Leo fought fiercely beside me, but his strength was being worn thin by the Demon King's onslaught. "Stay close to me," I urged him, my voice strained as I fought to hold the darkness at bay. "We can't fight him alone." He nodded without hesitation, his eyes never leaving mine. But I could see the exhaustion in his face, the toll this battle was taking on him. And then, as if the Demon King had been waiting for that very moment, he struck. A bolt of dark magic shot from his outstretched hand, hitting me square in the chest. The impact sent me sprawling to the ground, the breath knocked from my lungs. My vision blurred, and the world spun wildly around me. "No!" Leo shouted, rushing to my side. But it was too late. The Demon King's laughter echoed through the chaos. "You're too weak to face me. You will fall like all the others. And once you are mine, this world will fall with you." But as the darkness threatened to swallow me whole, I felt something else. A pulse of light, deep within me, stronger than ever before, powerful beyond comprehension. It was the power of the goddesses, the divine magic they had granted me. I reached for it, drawing it up from the very core of my being, and with a cry of defiance, I unleashed everything I had. The ground shook once more as a wave of light erupted from me, a radiant torrent of pure energy that cascaded outward like the first rays of dawn breaking through the darkest night. It was as if the very essence of life itself poured from my core, reaching into the very heart of the Demon King. His dark magic recoiled in the face of such purity, his armor crackling with the sheer force of it. His monstrous form trembled, a cold sweat breaking out across his skin, which was now scorched by the brilliance of my power. It burned, not just on the surface, but deep inside, as if the light was purging the darkness that had once consumed him. The Demon King staggered back, his once unshakable confidence wavering. His eyes widened with disbelief, a deep, guttural growl rising in his throat. The black armor that had once seemed impervious to anything was now crumbling, the dark energy swirling around him like a storm trying to protect its master. But the light was relentless. It split through the shadows, tearing at the very fabric of his existence, unraveling the power that had made him so formidable. His hands shot out, trying to shield himself from the blinding light, but it was no use. The light coiled around him, searing his flesh, digging into his very being. His laugh turned into a scream, raw and guttural, as the searing light stripped away the darkness that had been his strength for so long. The air around him vibrated with the intensity of the battle, the ground beneath us cracking and splintering under the weight of the magic clashing. The Demon King's voice turned to a harsh, broken hiss as the energy continued to eat away at him. "You think you can defeat me?" He spat, his voice laced with venom, but his confidence was cracking. His skin bubbled and blackened where the light touched him, his once mighty form beginning to wither, his dark magic slipping through his fingers like sand. He tried to summon more power, but the light overwhelmed him, leaving him no room to fight back. The light pulsed and throbbed in my hands as I summoned all my strength, calling forth the blade of divinity. It shone with a brilliance so bright that it illuminated the very heavens above. With a cry of pure resolve, I thrust the blade forward. The light seemed to crack the air itself as it sliced through the Demon King's defenses. The blade met its mark, the core of his chest, piercing through the corrupted armor, cutting through the twisted magic that surrounded him. The Demon King's body shook violently, and for the first time, fear flashed in his eyes. The blade of divinity was no ordinary weapon, it was the physical embodiment of purity, of everything that had been corrupted and twisted over millennia. It was meant to sever the darkness from the world, and it was doing exactly that. The blade cut through his very soul, a surge of blinding white energy bursting from the wound as his body started to disintegrate. "No," he screamed, his form starting to crumble into ash, his voice a final wail of rage and terror. But it was too late. The blade's light erupted, and in that instant, the Demon King was consumed by the very darkness he had tried to wield. His massive form disintegrated, his once powerful presence fading into nothingness. The dark magic that had held him together unraveled and burned away, leaving only a whisper of his existence in the air. The battlefield fell silent. The monstrous beasts that had once plagued us vanished into nothingness, their twisted forms fading with their master. The darkness that had held the world in its grip for so long began to recede, lifting from the land like a long-forgotten nightmare. The air, once thick with dread, cleared, and the first rays of dawn began to pierce the sky. I collapsed to my knees, the blade still glowing brightly in my hand, its light beginning to fade as the battle came to an end. My body was exhausted, my mind weary from the surge of power. I felt Leo's arms around me before I could even blink, pulling me close. He was shaking, his breath ragged as he held me tight. "We did it," he whispered, his voice a mixture of disbelief and relief. "You did it. You saved us." I leaned against him, too drained to speak, but in that moment, everything felt right. We had won. Together. The battle had ended, but the storm within me still raged. The air was thick with the remnants of magic, the echoes of the clash still reverberating through my body. Yet, amid the chaos, there was one constant, one steady force that I could cling to. Leo. His presence was grounding, his touch a warm anchor against the whirlwind of emotions and fear that threatened to overwhelm me. He pulled me close, his strong arms wrapping around me, holding me like he never wanted to let go. His breath was ragged, matching my own, but his grip on me was gentle, as if afraid that even the smallest movement would break the fragile connection between us. "Lisa," he whispered my name, his voice rough with emotion. He pulled back just enough to look at me, his eyes searching mine for something. "Are you okay? You're not hurt, are you?" I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of everything that had happened pressing against my chest. "I'm fine," I whispered, though my words didn't fully capture the chaos within. But his gaze never wavered, never stopped searching me. His fingers gently traced the line of my jaw, and it was almost as if the entire world faded into the background. All that mattered, all that I could focus on, was him. "I thought I lost you," he said, the rawness in his voice cutting through me. "After everything." I couldn't. His words broke, and for the first time, I saw the vulnerability in him, the fear that had gripped him all along. His eyes softened, full of a longing I couldn't ignore. "I can't lose you. Not now. Not ever." My heart stuttered in my chest. I had never seen Leo like this, so open, so exposed. He was always so strong, so confident, and yet here he was, allowing me to see the depth of his feelings. The weight of his words, his fear, pulled at something deep inside me. "I'm right here," I whispered, my voice barely more than a breath. "I'm not going anywhere, Leo. I promise. I'll always be here." He let out a shaky breath, and then, in a movement that was both tender and desperate, he cupped my face with both hands, bringing me closer. His forehead rested against mine, and for a heartbeat, nothing else mattered. Just us. Together. When we finally broke apart, our breaths came in heavy bursts, our foreheads resting against each other. I could still feel the warmth of his lips on mine, the thrum of his heartbeat against my chest. "I don't want to let go," Leo whispered, his voice thick with emotion, his hands holding me as if I were the most precious thing in the world. "You don't have to," I whispered back. "I'm not going anywhere." And in that moment, I realized that, despite everything we had faced, despite all the darkness and the battles to come, there was nothing more certain in my life than this. Leo. Us. Together. And that was enough to carry me through whatever came next. The days after the battle were filled with rebuilding, both of the kingdom and of hearts. The damage done by the Demon King's forces was vast, but the kingdom's spirit remained unbroken. People worked tirelessly to mend the broken walls, heal the wounded, and restore what had been lost. It wasn't just the physical scars that needed healing, there was also a quiet, unspoken need to rebuild trust, to rebuild hope. Through it all, Leo and I remained by each other's side. We spent our days visiting the people, helping in any way we could. He would often take my hand, his touch always warm and reassuring. But there was something else, something more between us now. A bond that couldn't be shattered, not by monsters, not by darkness, not by anything. I had never been more certain of anything in my life than I was of my feelings for him. One evening, as the sun set behind the newly restored palace, Leo took me to the garden, the place where we had shared so many quiet moments during our trials. His eyes were soft, his usual confidence giving way to something deeper, something vulnerable. "Lisa," he began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I never thought I'd find someone like you. In all my years, I never believed someone could hold so much light inside them, could bring so much strength. You've healed this kingdom, you've healed me, in ways I never imagined possible. And now, I want to spend the rest of my life with you, as your partner, as your king, but more than anything, as the man who loves you." My heart raced, my chest tightening at his words. I had never expected this moment to feel so overwhelming. I had been in love with Leo for so long, but hearing him say it out loud, in such a tender, sincere way, left me speechless. "Leo," I began, but he gently placed a finger on my lips, silencing me. "You don't have to say anything, Lisa. I already know." His voice was a whisper, full of affection. "I've never needed anyone more than I need you. You are my strength, my heart. Will you marry me? Will you be my queen?" Tears welled in my eyes as I nodded, unable to find the words to express everything I felt. All the fear, the uncertainty, the battle, we had come through it all together. Now, we were standing on the edge of a new beginning. "Yes," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. "I will. I love you, Leo." The royal wedding that followed was unlike anything the kingdom had ever seen. People from all walks of life gathered to celebrate the union of their king and queen. The palace was adorned with flowers, banners, and lights, a celebration of love, unity, and triumph over darkness. Leo and I stood before the altar, the weight of the moment heavy in the air. His hand rested on mine, warm and steady, grounding me. As we exchanged vows, I knew that we were not just promising ourselves to each other, We were promising to protect the kingdom we both loved. The ceremony was beautiful, a dream come true for both of us. And as we sealed our vows with a kiss, the crowd erupted in cheers, but all I could focus on was Leo. The man I loved, the one who had been with me through it all. The days that followed were filled with new responsibilities as Leo and I began our reign as the rulers of the kingdom. The people looked to us for guidance, for strength, and we gave it to them, not out of duty, but because we truly believed in the future we could create together. One morning, as I stood before the people during my first address as queen, I could feel the weight of the crown upon my head. But it was more than just the crown. It was the knowledge that I was no longer just a healer, a girl from the slums. I was the queen, and I had a duty to protect these people. I vow to you, my people, I said, my voice ringing out clear and strong, I will protect you. No matter the cost, no matter the darkness that tries to take us. I will stand by you, always. Together, we will ensure that our kingdom remains free, strong, and filled with hope. As I finished my speech, Leo's hand found mine, and together, we stood united in the face of whatever challenges the future might bring. I knew that with him by my side, there was nothing we couldn't overcome. And so, as the new queen of the kingdom, I swore to always protect the people who had supported me, who had believed in me, and most of all, to protect the love that had led us to this point, my love for Leo and his love for me. Our story, the story of light, love, and hope, was just beginning.
Like, share, and subscribe for more parts.